I am looking at technical specifications that have been circulating among defense analysts for the past 72 hours, data that has been quietly confirmed by multiple sources inside Iran's military-industrial complex, and I need you to understand what this represents. We are not talking about improved missiles. We are not talking about incremental upgrades to existing systems. We are talking about a circular error probable, a SEP, of 2 meters. 2 meters. To put that in perspective, that is the difference between hitting a building and hitting a specific window on a specific floor of that building. That is the difference between a strategic deterrent and a surgical instrument. In the next 18 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why this development represents the single most significant shift in regional military balance since the introduction of ballistic missiles to the Middle East. Why Western intelligence agencies are scrambling to reassess every threat calculation they have made over the past decade, and why what happens in the next 6 months will determine whether we see de-escalation or the most devastating conventional exchange in modern history. This analysis is based on technical reports, Defense Ministry statements, and corroborated data from multiple independent sources. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is not speculation. This is documented capability that has already been demonstrated in combat conditions. Let's start with what precision actually means in the context of ballistic missiles, because this is where most coverage gets it completely wrong. When we talk about missile accuracy, we are talking about circular error probable, SEP. This is the radius of a circle within which 50% of missiles are expected to land. It is a statistical measurement. If a missile system has a SEP of 50 meters, that means half of all missiles fired will land within a 50-meter radius of the intended target. The other half will land outside that radius. This is critical to understand because it determines what you can actually target. Older Iranian missile systems, the ones that have been in service for the past 2 decades, had SEP values ranging from 300 meters down to about 50 meters for the most advanced variants. At 300 meters, you can hit a military base. You can hit a neighborhood. You can create terror and disruption. But you cannot take out a specific radar installation. You cannot destroy a particular command bunker. You cannot strike a fuel depot without massive collateral damage to surrounding infrastructure. At 50 meters, you get better. You can target industrial facilities. You can go after large military installations with some confidence. But you still cannot conduct true precision warfare. At 2 meters, everything changes. At 2 meters, you can target a specific reinforced hangar at an airbase. You can strike a particular building in a command complex. You can take out a radar array without touching the barracks next to it. You can hit a fuel storage tank and leave the one beside it untouched. This is not area bombardment. This is surgical strike capability. And according to multiple reports confirmed by defense analysts tracking Iranian military developments, this is exactly what Iran has now achieved with its latest generation ballistic missiles. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing you are not getting this level of analysis anywhere else. Now, let's talk about what Iran actually built and how they got here, because the engineering challenge this represents cannot be overstated. Announcement number 1, the guidance system revolution. And this one matters more than anything else because it explains how a country under the most severe technology sanctions in modern history managed to achieve precision levels that match or exceed systems developed by nations with defense budgets 50 times larger. Iranian engineers achieved this through a combination of indigenous inertial navigation systems, advanced terminal guidance packages, and what defense researchers believe is satellite-based correction during the terminal flight phase. According to reporting by Middle East Eye, and corroborated by analysis from the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Iran has deployed a constellation of domestically produced satellites that provide targeting data with sufficient accuracy to enable mid-course corrections. These are not communication satellites. These are purpose-built military reconnaissance and navigation platforms. The missiles themselves incorporate what Iranian defense officials have described as hybrid guidance systems. During the boost phase and mid-course phase, the missile relies on an advanced inertial measurement unit, essentially a highly sophisticated gyroscope system that tracks position, velocity, and orientation. But during the terminal phase, the final moments before impact, the system switches to active terminal guidance. This could be radar-based, optical, or infrared, depending on the specific variant. Multiple defense analysts, including those writing for Jane's Defense Weekly, have noted that recent Iranian missile tests have demonstrated impact patterns consistent with terminal guidance correction. Dr. Uzi Rubin, a former director of Israel's Missile Defense Organization, stated in a technical assessment published in February 2026, and I am quoting him directly here, that Iran's latest missile systems demonstrate guidance accuracy previously seen only in Russian Iskander systems and certain advanced Chinese platforms. He specifically noted that the precision demonstrated in strikes against mock targets suggests SEP values in the low single-digit meter range. Iran currently operates several missile systems believed to incorporate this technology. The Khaybar Shekan, a medium-range ballistic missile with a range of approximately 1,400 kilometers, the Fatah-1, which Iranian officials claim incorporates hypersonic glide technology in its terminal phase, and most significantly, the recently unveiled Fatah-2, which Defense Ministry sources describe as having full precision strike capability across its entire 2,000-kilometer range. That number matters because 2,000 kilometers puts every strategic target in the region within reach with precision engagement capability. Received. That is announcement number 1. Announcement number 2, and this is the part that Western military planners are taking very seriously, this precision capability has already been demonstrated in combat conditions. This is not theoretical. This is not claimed capability that exists only in promotional videos. This has been used. On January 16, 2025, Iranian forces conducted strikes against what they described as terrorist targets in northern Iraq and Syria. Western analysts initially dismissed these as standard ballistic missile attacks with the usual collateral damage concerns. But when satellite imagery analysis was completed by multiple independent sources, including ImageSat International and Maxar Technologies, something became very clear. The missiles had struck specific buildings within larger compounds, while leaving adjacent structures completely untouched. In the Erbil strike, Iranian missiles hit a single 3-story building that Israeli intelligence was reportedly using as a coordination facility. The building was destroyed. The structures on either side, separated by less than 20 meters, sustained minimal damage. In Syria, the strikes targeted specific warehouses at a military logistics hub, while the administrative buildings and barracks in the same complex remained functional. This is not luck. This is precision. Stay with me, because this is where the narrative completely changes and where the strategic implications become impossible to ignore. When you can strike with this level of accuracy, you change the entire calculus of deterrence. You change what kinds of targets are vulnerable. You change how air defense systems are deployed. You change everything. Traditional missile defense assumes you are protecting large areas against weapons with limited accuracy. You position your interceptors to cover cities, military bases, critical infrastructure zones. But when the incoming missile can target a specific building, or a specific radar installation, or a specific command vehicle, the defensive problem becomes exponentially more complex. You cannot defend everything with precision. You must prioritize. And the moment you prioritize, you create vulnerabilities that your adversary can exploit. According to analysis published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies in March 2026, Israel's multi-layered air defense network, which includes Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow systems, was designed to intercept missiles aimed at population centers and large military installations. The systems are optimized for that mission, but precision strikes against hardened military targets, particularly strikes using depressed trajectories or terminal maneuvering, present a fundamentally different challenge. The report notes that interception rates against these types of attacks could be significantly lower than the 90% rates claimed for traditional ballistic threats. Received. That is announcement number 2. Announcement number 3, and this one almost nobody in the mainstream media is connecting correctly. This capability has triggered a complete reassessment of regional strike planning on all sides, and that reassessment is happening right now. For Israel, the calculation has always been that Iranian missiles were a terror weapon and a strategic nuisance, but not a precision military tool that could degrade Israeli warfighting capacity in the opening hours of a conflict. Israeli military doctrine assumes that in any confrontation with Iran, Israel retains complete air superiority and can conduct sustained operations against Iranian targets, while Iranian retaliation remains limited to inaccurate ballistic missile volleys that cause some damage but do not fundamentally impair Israeli operational capabilities. That assumption is now under serious question. If Iran can conduct precision strikes against Israeli air bases, targeting specific hangars where F-35 aircraft are housed, or radar installations that provide early warning coverage, or command facilities that coordinate air defense networks, then the opening phase of any conflict looks completely different. According to reporting by Haaretz in late March, the Israeli Defense Forces conducted a series of classified war games specifically focused on scenarios where Iranian precision missiles successfully degraded Israeli air capabilities in the first 6 to 12 hours of fighting. The results, according to defense sources who spoke on condition of anonymity, were described as sobering. For the United States, which maintains extensive military infrastructure across the region, from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar to naval facilities in Bahrain to army positions in Jordan and Syria, this capability means that American forces are no longer operating in an environment of overwhelming tactical superiority. Every aircraft on every tarmac, every command post, every logistics hub, every fuel depot is now potentially targetable with weapons that can actually hit them with meaningful probability. In February, General Michael Kurilla, commander of United States Central Command, testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee and stated, and I am quoting directly, that Iran's advances in missile accuracy represent a significant evolution in the threat environment. He specifically noted that force protection measures at U.S. facilities across the Middle East are being comprehensively reviewed. That is military speak for we are vulnerable and we are scrambling to fix it. The reason this development is so strategically significant is the same reason precision-guided munitions revolutionized air warfare in the 1990s. Before precision guidance, you needed hundreds of aircraft dropping thousands of bombs to destroy a target with any certainty. After precision guidance, you could send 2 aircraft with 4 bombs and achieve the same result. The same logic applies here. Before precision ballistic missiles, Iran would need to launch dozens or hundreds of missiles at a target to have confidence in destroying it, exposing its launch infrastructure to counter battery fire, and depleting its inventory rapidly. With precision guidance, Iran can achieve strategic effects with a fraction of the expenditure, preserving its forces and complicating the defensive problem for its adversaries. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now, let's talk about what is really happening behind the headlines. Because there are 2 stories playing out simultaneously, and the mainstream media is only covering one of them. The public story is about tensions, threats, and diplomatic posturing. The private story, the one being discussed in classified briefings from Tehran to Tel Aviv to Washington, is about force vulnerability and strategic recalculation. Think carefully about what this represents. When a regional power under comprehensive sanctions, facing the most sophisticated adversaries on the planet, achieves a military capability that forces those adversaries to completely rethink their operational assumptions, that is not incremental progress. That is a qualitative shift in the balance of power. And when that shift happens, the responses tend to be dramatic. Israel has already begun repositioning certain high-value assets, dispersing aircraft across a larger number of facilities, hardening critical infrastructure beyond previous standards. According to defense industry sources speaking to Defense News, Israel has accelerated procurement of additional interceptor missiles and is exploring options for boost phase interception systems that would target Iranian missiles during their most vulnerable flight phase immediately after launch. These are expensive, technically challenging solutions, and the fact that they are being pursued signals how seriously the threat is being taken. The United States has quietly increased the number of Patriot batteries deployed across the region and has reportedly provided upgraded interceptors to key allies. But there is a fundamental limitation here. Missile defense is expensive, and offensive precision missiles are relatively cheap. Iran can produce ballistic missiles far faster than the United States, and its allies can produce interceptors. This is the classic asymmetric warfare problem, and it does not favor the defender. Here is where the psychological dimension becomes critical. Precision strike capability is not just about the damage you can inflict, it is about the uncertainty you create in your adversary's planning. If Israeli military planners cannot assume their air bases will be functional after the first hours of a conflict, then every operational plan has to account for degraded capability. If American commanders cannot assume their logistics networks will remain intact, then every deployment timeline has to build in redundancy. This creates hesitation, and in crisis scenarios, hesitation can be the difference between escalation and de-escalation. Professor Marandi himself has repeatedly emphasized that Iran's military developments are designed not for offensive conquest but for deterrence. The goal is to make the cost of attacking Iran so high, so unpredictable, so potentially catastrophic for the attacker's own military infrastructure that the attack never happens. Precision missiles serve that goal perfectly. They turn every military base, every command center, every strategic asset into a potential hostage. And that changes the calculus. Now, if you are watching this from the United States or Europe or anywhere outside the region, you might be thinking this is a distant problem that does not affect you. But let me be very clear. If you care about energy prices, this affects you. Approximately 20% of global oil supply moves through the Strait of Hormuz. Any conflict that involves precision strikes on regional energy infrastructure, on desalination plants, on port facilities, on refineries, would send oil prices to levels that make the 2022 energy crisis look manageable. If you operate a business with any logistics component, what is happening in this region is a cost of goods story. If you own a vehicle, this is a gas price story. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. When a technologically inferior power develops a capability that neutralizes the primary advantage of a superior opponent, the strategic balance shifts, and the superior power must either adapt or accept a new reality. The parallel here is the Soviet experience in Afghanistan from 1979 to 1989. The Soviet Union possessed overwhelming military superiority, advanced aircraft, armored divisions, professional military forces. The Mujahideen possessed small arms and determination. The war was supposed to be over quickly. Then the United States provided Stinger missiles, shoulder-fired surface-to-air weapons that could bring down Soviet helicopters and low-flying aircraft. Suddenly, Soviet air superiority was contested. Helicopter operations became high risk. Close air support became dangerous. And the entire Soviet operational approach, which relied on mobility and air power, had to be fundamentally rethought. The war dragged on for a decade. The Soviets lost 14,000 troops. They ultimately withdrew, and the Soviet Union itself collapsed within 3 years. Now, I am not suggesting that precision missiles will cause the collapse of Israel or the United States. That is not the parallel. The parallel is this. When the weaker side develops a capability that contests the stronger side's primary advantage, the conflict becomes longer, more costly, and more unpredictable than the stronger side anticipated. And the stronger side must either commit to a level of escalation it may not be willing to accept, or it must recalibrate its objectives. Israel's primary military advantage is air power and intelligence. Precision Iranian missiles threaten both, directly in the case of air power by targeting the bases and aircraft themselves, and indirectly in the case of intelligence by targeting the facilities and systems that enable intelligence collection. If that advantage is contested, Israeli military operations become riskier, more expensive, and less decisive. That creates pressure for either much greater escalation, potentially including strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities or leadership, or for diplomatic engagement that was previously considered unnecessary. The United States faces a similar calculation. American military doctrine assumes that in any regional conflict, the United States will establish air superiority within days and can then operate with relative impunity. If Iranian precision missiles can degrade American air bases, the timeline extends, the costs increase, and the operational risks multiply. This does not mean the United States cannot win a military confrontation with Iran. It almost certainly can. But it means the price tag in lives, equipment, time, and political capital goes up significantly. And that changes the political willingness to pay it. So where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths, because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1. Deterrence holds. Iran's precision missile capability is recognized by all parties as creating a new balance of terror, a situation where any conflict would be so destructive to all sides that none are willing to initiate it. In this scenario, we see a tense but stable period where diplomatic channels remain open, proxy conflicts continue at a manageable level, but direct state-to-state warfare is avoided, because the costs are understood to be unacceptable. This path requires rational actors on all sides and restraint during crisis moments. It is possible, but it requires discipline that has not always been evident. Path 2, limited conflict with strategic restraint. A crisis escalates to the point where strikes are exchanged, but both sides deliberately limit their targeting to avoid crossing red lines that would trigger full-scale war. Iran uses its precision missiles against specific military targets, but avoids civilian infrastructure and population centers. Israel retaliates against Iranian military facilities, but avoids nuclear sites and political leadership. The United States provides support, but does not commit to full engagement. This scenario is extremely difficult to manage because once missiles are flying, the fog of war, miscalculation, domestic political pressure, and unintended escalation can easily push beyond the intended limits. But it is conceivable if back-channel communications remain functional and both sides have clear off-ramps. Path 3. Full escalation. A miscalculation, an assassination, a proxy attack that crosses a red line, any number of triggers could lead to a scenario where restraint collapses. Iran launches large-scale precision strikes against Israeli and American military infrastructure across the region. Israel retaliates with strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, leadership targets, and military production. The United States commits fully to the conflict. Regional allies and proxies are drawn in. Energy infrastructure is targeted. The Strait of Hormuz is mined or blockaded. Oil prices spike to $200 per barrel or higher. Global economic disruption follows. This path leads to a regional war with global economic consequences, and the outcome is unpredictable. I think we are closer to path 1 than the headlines suggest, but the risk of miscalculation that pushes us toward path 3 is higher than it has been in decades. The precision missile capability Iran now possesses makes them more confident in their ability to deter, but it also makes their adversaries more anxious and potentially more willing to strike preemptively before the capability is fully deployed and integrated. That is the danger zone, the period where a new capability has been revealed but the strategic adjustments to account for it have not yet fully stabilized. That is where we are right now. Here are the questions I want you to take away. First, how do Israel and the United States adjust their force posture to account for this threat without signaling weakness or creating new vulnerabilities? Second, does Iran's new capability make them more cautious because they have achieved deterrence, or more aggressive because they feel protected? Third, what happens when the next crisis erupts, whether it is in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, or the Palestinian territories? And both sides now know that escalation could involve precision strikes on critical infrastructure. Tell me in the comments what you think the most likely path forward is. Tell me if you think precision missile technology fundamentally changes deterrence dynamics, or if it is just another incremental development in a long arms race. We will keep tracking every development in the Middle East, every shift in military deployments, every public statement and private signal. That is what this channel does every single day. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with everyone in your network who is trying to understand what is actually happening beneath the surface level reporting. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, because this story is not over, it is accelerating. And we will see you in the next analysis.